Hello everyone, greetings and welcome to my channel. Today we will examine yet another horrifying case together. Human remains were discovered by Mexico City police on November 6, 2014. A portion of the torso was discovered in an empty lot close to the city's exit. A few days later, suitcases containing legs and limbs were discovered scattered over the capital. The most disturbing thing was that the limbs were devoid of fingers. It appears that a particularly violent criminal was operating in the area, which is why the cops raised the warning. Officers were gathered in squads and they searched the streets. The principal objective was to locate the unlucky man's head and limbs and stop additional crimes. Everyone at the time was certain that a vicious serial killer was responsible for this crime. Although the head and fingers were never located, it was concluded that the remains belonged to the same individual because of the competent work of forensic specialists. But there were no fingers or teeth, thus it was impossible to identify this person. The narrative takes place in North America. Alejandra Lafuente, the protagonist and a resident of Mexico City, is a stunning brunette with lovely hair and sparkling brown eyes that accentuate her thick, black-as-tar lashes. She made an effort to keep her athletic, trim body through yoga, breathing techniques, and fitness. Alejandra was frequently spotted at a spa, massage parlor, or beauty salon because she enjoyed taking care of herself. She worked on science while lounging on the beach during warm weather, and she could go to tanning salons on overcast days. All things considered, it can be said that the young lady thought highly of herself and saw herself as the epitome of feminine beauty. Alejandra's career progressed without any hindrance. Alberto Dente, her father, is a renowned psychiatrist and a doctor of sciences. He is a renowned scientist who works with mental disorders like schizophrenia and manic disorders. He is also well known for his patient experiments in addition to his scientific contributions. Alejandra held her father in high regard. She went in his direction because she wanted to experience the same success. She enrolled in the top psychiatry university to do this, and she graduated with honors. Her father's connections, coupled with her exceptional brilliance, ingenuity and determination, enabled her to draft and successfully defend her thesis on manic syndrome. But Alejandra didn't pursue a career in psychiatry afterwards. The work of a psychotherapist drew her in. The young woman obtained a license and set up shop in a brand new business center in the core of the capital, thanks to her father's financial support. Though she exclusively saw ladies, there was no lack of clients. Counseling was sought by women who suffered from depression, interpersonal issues, eating disorders, and low self-esteem. Although Alejandra assisted in resolving family issues, her personal life was unsatisfactory, as is sometimes the case. Although the young woman's first marriage ended in divorce, the pair did end up with two adorable girls who had Alejandra's eyes and her father's sense of humor. Alejandra was not deterred, though. 2 kids, in her opinion, did not mean she had to give up on herself. She remained hopeful about finding her true love, a man who could raise her girls with integrity. Alejandra had a visit from her ex-husband, whose identity is kept a secret, at some point following their split. The dad would regularly visit his little kids on the weekends to spend time with them and, if necessary, assist his ex-wife with domestic tasks. But little did the ex-husband know that this would be his last visit. Alejandra requested him to go through the backyard because she thought the front door's latch was stuck. With that, the man entered the house. Alejandra asked him to enter the bathroom, explaining that her youngest daughter was taking a bath at the moment. The man entered not suspecting anything. The typical sounds of cartoons and children laughing were absent from the house, leaving an eerie silence. The man entered the bathroom. The floor was covered in tape and the bathtub was empty of any daughters. He started to notice that something was not quite right. At that moment, his ex-wife appeared behind him brandishing a hammer and struck him in the head with all of her strength. Blood was streaming from the man's open skull wound as he plummeted, covering everything in his path. As the specialists subsequently discovered, the man was dead practically immediately after taking the initial strike with a large blunt weapon. He had no chance to rescue himself. Unexpectedly returning early from a friend, the oldest daughter saw this very awful image and unintentionally became a witness. The kids watched their parents fight a lot. Alejandra was found to have mental health issues. She frequently acted out against her pals. Friends frequently observed scratches on her husband's arms and neck, indicating that the young woman was capable of inflicting physical harm. Regarding the housemates, they were witness to her inappropriate behavior and frequent tantrums in public. However, things spiraled out of control this time. After leaving the house, the daughter started to call for assistance. A neighbor quickly sprang into action and summoned the police squad. The psychologist was taken into custody and given a murder charge. The young woman was put in a cell at the station and had to wait for her first hearing for a month. Alejandra denied any guilt during the trial. Attorneys presented their interpretation of self-defense. They claimed that Alejandra's ex-husband was incredibly envious of her and made up the story that she was bringing guys into the home, which would have a bad psychological impact on young girls. He unexpectedly arrived up at his ex-wife's house the day of the crime, entered through the back door in the hopes of catching his wife with another man, and then attacked Alejandra, who was in the bathroom assembling a nightstand. She was then forced to defend herself, and she struck her ex-husband twice in the back of the head. June 14, 2012 was the date of the sentencing. Alejandra was given a sentence of 1 year and 4 months after the defense presented evidence and 2 minor children were present. Her father's financial support and the concerted efforts of attorneys resulted in the suspension of her sentence. A few months later, an appeal was submitted once more, along with a plea to have the charges dropped. The claim was self-defense against assault. Human rights advocates requested a jury trial because they could not stand to see the poor woman who was put on trial and accused of being a victim of domestic abuse. The court then re-examined the case and granted an acquittal. The young woman continued to give her psychological counseling after being released. She portrayed herself as a victim of gender inequity who, like the majority of women in North America, battled for her rights and ultimately succeeded. Alejandra became even more well-liked by prospective customers as a result of her enhanced image. Soon after, Adrian Carrera, Francis's son, Alan Carrera, a prominent businessman from Mexico, was introduced to Maria Alejandra. He was a statuesque, tall and attractive man. His father was a highly accomplished professional who had previously served as the Central District's Chief of Special Services. Soon after, Alan grew his company and established a nationwide chain of building supply outlets. Alan's firm had 2 parts, one of which was legal and the other, which not many people knew about, was intimately associated with criminal activity. In addition, when one of his son's financial scams was discovered, it was precisely because of this that his father lost his job. Furthermore, Alan owned shares in a criminal organization involved in the importation of psychoactive drugs into the United States. Their base was manned by police officers they had purchased, and it was situated in a border town. A tiny percentage of the South's drug trafficking was under the control of this gang. Alan's father faced a 20-year prison sentence after it was established that he was participating in his son's extramarital affairs and that the police had obtained a statement from him. However, Adrian Carrera was granted early release on July 18, 2000, as a result of the Witness Protection Program. He gave his son and his lawful business his whole attention as soon as he was freed. The boy swiftly grew up, taking on the opinions and experiences of his father. Alan Carrera made the decision to become an entrepreneur, just like his father, after receiving his undergraduate degree. Despite his youth, he managed the home appliance store entirely on his own and showed great interest in it. Although this firm was not as big as his father's, it was profitable. Despite the abundance of women in his immediate vicinity, Alan had a boyhood crush on a classmate whom he mistakenly assumed to be his spouse. Wise, attractive, from a respectable background, the marriage was brief but fruitful. Dad has a lovely daughter, but a lot of work and Alan's near-complete absence from the home caused their marriage to fail. Parting from the woman he had loved since high school was incredibly difficult for Alan. The man started drinking because he was lonely and depressed and could not find joy in reading new novels. This developed into a poisonous habit over time. Alan tried a variety of coping mechanisms to deal with his protracted sadness and love of booze, including books, AA meetings, and drips. However, one day, fate prevented Alan from seeing renowned psychiatrist Alberto, who happens to be Maria Alejandra's father. The woman Alan was now divorcing was likewise going through a trying time. The young woman's sole man was Alan, and even when they split up, she could not let anybody else into her life. To her. Alan's ex-wife made the decision to see a therapist as well, in an attempt to overcome her loneliness. The rehabilitating psychiatrist for Alan indicated that he was ethically unable to lead both couples, and as a result, he advised the lady to consult Alejandra. It's important to remember, though, that he didn't disclose to the clients that Alejandra was his daughter. Alejandra saw right away that her patient and her ex-husband would make a wonderful couple. He was reported to be a charming, well-to-do man in his prime. Alejandra didn't hesitate to invite her client to bring her ex-husband along for a follow-up visit. The therapist claimed that she could break the deep tie between the ex-spouses and cure their problem in just one session. Alejandra implemented her plan to entice the business owner right away during their first meeting. The outcome was immediate. Alan asked the therapist a cup of coffee to talk about family issues right after the appointment. The young woman initially objected to going on a date out of propriety, since it went against medical ethics. Yet the date happened that same evening. Their relationship swiftly spiraled out of control. Alan's ex-wife was horrified to learn about it shortly after. She even considered reporting the event to the Medical Ethics Commission, but she chose not to. Alejandra was able to persuade her client to go past the difficulty because she was an extremely skilled specialist. It does, after all, express envy and an inability to let go of the ex-spouse. Therefore, a joyful future won't work in the commission, the doctor claims. When the sessions ended, Alan's ex-wife likewise made the decision not to apply. In the meanwhile, things moved very quickly with the recently wed couple. The young couple made the decision to live together a few months after their first date. They chose to make their relationship official after 2 more months, but Alan had no idea what secrets his fiancée was hiding, or why she had divorced her former spouse. Alan made the decision to spend a weekend with his folks in April 2014 and took a plane to them. It turned into a wonderful opportunity to discuss his sweetheart and the upcoming wedding. Alejandra was a stranger to Alan's parents. They had no idea that their son had ever heard of her. Thus, they were shocked to learn of such significant information so late in life. The marriage was officially registered 1 week following the meeting with the parents. Remarkably, Alejandra requested her husband refrain from contacting her friends and family. Since the wedding was meant to be small and the budget did not allow for inviting everyone one would have liked, no invitations were sent. But as it turned out, the father of the bride did show up for the wedding. The young family's existence first appeared to be the stuff of fairy tales. They were joyful, young, and full of ambitions. It was brief, though. Alejandra was unable to control her hysteric tendencies. Get close to the terrifying end of this tale, but nobody has realized it yet. The couple's relationship started to drastically shift, because Alan was a rather private person and would not discuss personal matters with acquaintances. Nothing was known about what went on in the couple's closed doors. But it was clear that the previous relationship faltered, and the couple's happiness had diminished. Following his meeting with Alejandra, Alan cut ties with his family. The wedding at which the parents were not invited was the last straw. They even stopped talking to one another after that. The rest of Alan's friends started to observe that his wife was getting more tense, acting erratically at times, and losing her anger easily. Following a few such events, Alan reduced the frequency of collaborative meetings out of extreme humiliation. The family had everyday arguments that were nearly never justified. According to Alejandra's own account, she made the decision one evening to access her husband's cell phone. As is sometimes the case, some women's correspondence was found to contain some really explicit material. It was difficult, of course, to ignore incidents like this. Alejandra claimed that this was the final straw. She testified in court that her spouse had physically abused, verbally abused, and otherwise degraded her. Upon the discovery of additional cheating, preserving this marriage became futile. For reasons that are unclear, Alejandra chose not to use conventional psychotherapy techniques and make an effort to keep the marriage intact. The young woman chose to handle Alan using a strategy she was previously familiar with after considering her husband's infidelity. Once she made this choice, she could devote all of her efforts to designing the ideal murder scheme. Alan, however, carried on with his steady, routine life. He had no idea what was waiting for him. Even though Alan and his family did not always communicate, he was unable to miss the yearly feast that was thrown in honor of his grandfather's birthday. Hey, Alan came to the feast, of course, but his parents made it plain that his wife was not in the best of company when she visited. Was it realistic for Alejandra to believe that this might be the final time the family saw Alan alive? The scenario infuriated Alejandra and strained their bond even more. Alan last texted his family on October 31st, 2014, to let them know he had returned home safely after his birthday party. Since then, he has not been in contact. It had never occurred before, therefore it was rather weird that he hadn't been seen at work either for a few days. The business owner took great responsibility for his work and since the opening of a new store was shortly anticipated, the head's presence was very essential. The wife's horrifying scheme, which she implemented as soon as Alan got back from vacation, was the cause of this. After yet another scandal, Alejandra made the snap decision to get rid of her spouse. She mixed the milk he usually drank before bed with a potent sleeping medication. Then she used a pillow to suffocate him. She took pleasure in witnessing her spouse gradually lose consciousness while making a pitiful effort to take off the pillow and inhale. The most difficult phase was coming, disposing of the body. She hadn't had time to prepare for this particular moment. She had to make do with what she had because Alan was too hefty. Alejandra had little time, so she hurried to retrieve an electric saw from the neighbor's vegetable patch. Her face grimly smiling, she cut her husband's body to pieces. Such a thing could only be done by a true sadist. She then had the presence of mind to chop off fingers and extract teeth before packing the body pieces into trash bags. In the event that the body was discovered, these would aid the inquiry in identifying the deceased. In an attempt to remove the dead from the house without raising any red flags, Alejandra crammed all the bags into luggage, but she was unsuccessful. Alejandra could not possibly sneak out of the house with the suitcase hidden, as morning drew near. From her window, an elderly neighbor who suffered from insomnia observed her. The young woman's early departure concerned her a little. In addition, Alejandra was acting strangely and her husband had not assisted in lifting the heavier baggage. She was constantly scanning her surroundings. Alejandra went back home at morning. The on-guard neighbor was taken aback by this even more. She had, as it would turn out, covered her tracks by dispersing bags containing her ex-husband's remains among several neighborhoods. She resumed her regular life as the new day arose. The first horrible discovery was made by Mexican police officials on November 6, 2014. A human torso devoid of teeth and fingers. Because of the extreme savagery of the incident, the entire police force was placed on alert. Other body pieces were discovered in different sections of the city less than a day later. The fact that there was a substantial distance between the locations where the parcels were discovered is also intriguing. This would be the explanation used later for Alejandra's protracted absence from home. Experts at the top forensic laboratory swiftly determined that every body part belonged to the same individual after receiving all of the body parts. To keep herself from coming under suspicion, the offender began sending letters to Alan's family. She made matters worse in an attempt to allay suspicions. She was completely unaware that her husband had cut all ties to his family and hadn't spoken to any of them recently. On behalf of Alen, Alejandra let his parents know that they would be away on vacation. Alejandra's father spoiled the whole scheme. Alberto started calling Alan's father's residence. He wanted to know if Alejandra's whereabouts were known to his son-in-law's family. The patients are quite concerned that they won't be able to attend counseling sessions because Alberto hasn't heard from her in a long. Later, he gives Alan's family another call to let them know that his daughter has been located and that she had to be compelled to check herself into the clinic because her husband's infidelity was causing her to suffer from despair. The relatives were quite alarmed by this and made vain attempts to locate Alan. Subsequently, the businessman's family approached the authorities. The scientists in the laboratory made the decision to compare Alan's traits with the recently discovered corpse's remnants. There was a perfect match. His relatives were also able to identify him. It was particularly difficult for Alan's grandfather, who developed heart problems shortly after the identification, as he was the only grandchild. Alan's house and office were placed under search warrant by the investigation. In the house's backyard stood a mound of recently turned earth. The man's teeth and fingers were found after some digging. The capital city was more surprised by the discovery. Alejandra was caught right away. Additionally, blood traces were discovered in one of the apartments, as well as in the garage and on the vehicle's trunk. Alejandra first made an effort to downplay her guilt. She thought that, like with her previous spouse, she would be able to get away with it without consequence, but the investigation swiftly resolved the matter. An elderly witness's testimony was helpful. The time she testified fit Alan's anticipated time of death. Alejandra took use of her position to acquire a potent sleeping pill, the kind of medication that only a physician could receive. This made the situation worse. The evidence gathered contributed to the establishment of a connection between Alejandra and her husband's horrific murder. The fact that the man entered the house and never left was further supported by CCTV footage. CCTV footage also verified that the suitcases had been taken out. The verdict was rendered by the jury on December 10, 2014. Alejandra received a life sentence in jail. The savage murder, the attempt to hide it, and the exploitation of the official position, all of these things worked against the former psychotherapist. Her father, who attempted to free his daughter from jail by using bribery and connections, was also unable to do so. But all he could do to avoid further notoriety was to keep the trial off limits to the public and media. But he did it all for his own professional benefit. Very few people will now consult an expert who reared such a vicious monster and was unable to identify issues with his own daughter in a timely manner. During the trial, the matter of Alejandra's first husband's passing was also brought up. But the years have passed, and the evidence in this case was lost. Alejandra's father's account of his involvement in the events was also taken into account. He and his daughter were suspected of working together to commit crimes motivated by scientific curiosity, but no proof was discovered for this theory. The victim's repeated pleas resulted in the punishment being reduced to death. Such sentences are quite rare in Mexico, especially during these times, thus this is a unique scenario. Furthermore, the defendant is not entitled to a case review. The victim's family must receive the accused's home and all of his belongings. But since the person can no longer be brought back, who can this console? Alejandra seemed to be a harsh and practical woman. Despite medical testing denying it, she had serious mental health problems. In addition, she was influenced by her father and employed her official position to further her insane schemes. Her first crime had simply set her free, and she was now imprisoned. Alejandra felt untouchable, so she carried on with her bad deeds. If this awful woman hadn't been cleared the first time, maybe Alan would still be here. However, it was already too late to discuss it. Jack was with you. Thanks for watching. There are a lot of surprising stories ahead, so subscribe to the channel. I'll see you once again.